Chapter 2, Part 3. It occurs to Keith that the problem is now that he's seen how perfectly daddy Shiro is, he can't unsee it. And honestly, he doesn't know if he actually wants to unsee it. Part of him already knows that he's going to regret this. That part of him hasn't caught up yet as he flips the lock on his bedroom door. Nerves have him fumbling, and he keeps thinking about the way Shiro's lips felt against his temple earlier this week, and the way Shiro's knuckles felt against his hip bone earlier tonight. All of it's enough to send him stumbling back until his knees hit the low frame of his bed, and he lets himself collapse. One shoulder knocks into the wall. Pain shudders down his arm, but he barely notices, too busy shoving his sweats and briefs down with one hand and spitting into the other. Barely gets his clothes done around his thighs before he's gripping his cock just this side of too hard. Everything sparks as he swipes a thumb over the head. His hips jerk up, needing more friction, and he bites back the high whine building in his throat. It's never been like this. Not the 0 to 120 need to orgasm. But now it is, and he's helpless against it. Planting a foot on the mattress and bracing his shoulders against the wall, he tries to chase down what he needs. Sweat curls the hair at his temples. Pre does more to slick his hand than the spit did, and soon the glide is not perfect, but good. Right. Just enough burn that he shudders each time he reaches the head. But minutes pass, and he's still right there. Every inch of him wound tight and clenched with need. Almost. Inherent self-preservation has always kept him from fantasizing about Shiro in anything but the most obscure terms. Yeah, he knows when he imagines being pinned down and fucked by someone with Shiro's build, he's imagining Shiro. But so long as he doesn't name Shiro, there's plausible deniability. Now, he imagines being pulled into Shiro's lap. How the prosthetic would ruck up his T to press against his sternum, pinning him in place, the metal cool against his overheated skin. Rutting up into the tight channel of his fist, he imagines the way Shiro would nip at the shell of his ear. "Look at you," Shiro whispers in his mind. The words come out soft, eager, proud. "Falling apart for me, so sweet." Relief is so close, his teeth ache with it. Maybe later he'll regret it, but for now he lets himself sink deeper into the fantasy. Shiro would push a thumb into his mouth, the calloused pad salty as he pressed down on Keith's tongue, muffling his whining cries. This is just the warm-up. Shiro's big. Keith would need to be orgasm loose to take him. Be good for me, baby boy. Keith grits his teeth as the world goes shocky white behind his eyelids. Both hands drop to the sheets, and he fists up the material till it nearly tears. His hips buck as cum splatters across his stomach in hot arcs. By the time his cock softens into a warm line across his hip, he's satiated and relaxed and close to sleep. Tossing an arm over his face blocks out the lights he's too exhausted to turn off. Sleep drifts closer, hazy gray, and he kicks off his sweats in briefs and slow movements. Curling over onto his side, he curls his face into his pillow and lets himself imagine it's Shiro. Predictably, he does feel like shit the next morning. And the 3 mornings, all marred by guilt hangovers from jerking off to the thought of Shiro, after that. Keith thinks it might be time to give up. Theoretically, giving up would free him from this guilt, or at least make it more bearable. When he braces the punching bag to steady it after a hard punch sent it swinging wide, He decides that it does feel freeing. Or it will, once it sinks in that he doesn't have to think about how he's going to seduce Shiro today, and that while seducing, he may end up tempted into doing something he shouldn't. With that off his shoulders, everything will go back to feeling like normalcy, if not happiness. It will. It will. It will. The thing is, his friends won't let this go. Earlier, he had to turn off his phone just to stop the constant parade of text messages. Apparently, they all have opinions about how he should handle the fucking teddy bear. And Shiro. Especially Shiro. That's the problem, he's pretty sure. That his friends won't let this go. Not that Keith himself doesn't entirely know how to let this go. Another too hard punch sends the bag squeaking on his chain. Quickly, he reaches out to brace it before starting up again. There's a faint burn in his shoulders from the strain. As quick workouts go, this is a bad option. He knows that, and knows that if Shiro was here, he'd be in trouble for pushing it. But he needs to hit something that isn't one of his smug, nosy, well-meaning friends. Anyway, Keith knows how to let go. He's tried plenty of things in his quest to get Shiro to love him. Most of them involved a variable level of dignity lost, which Lance has documented evidence of, and is always happy to walk Keith down the memory lane of. Sometimes it was better to retreat than to keep trying something that obviously wasn't working. Retreat wasn't calling it quits. Giving up on a plan wasn't the same thing as giving up on Shiro. Not that it's like that now, either, because giving up on the stupid Daddy King plan isn't the same as giving up on Shiro. It's just giving up on Shiro as his daddy, and that's fine. It is, because Shiro's never been, Keith, you're 15 past. Veronica's voice cuts through the generic pop music they blast in the gym and his own thoughts. It's got the sharp note of command to it that only older siblings ever really manage. At least, according to Lance. Keith turns toward her blindly. Opens his mouth to ask what he's 15 past on. Something heavy slams into his hip. Years of surprise beatings means he doesn't yelp, just grunts and tucks as he slams into the ground. Above him, punching bag keeps squeaking as it slows to a stop. Nothing's hurt aside from his side. It'll bruise, but not enough to keep him from walking. It's fine. He's fine. No one's coming after him, and what he needs to do now is breathe through the adrenaline. So he's lying there on the floor of the gym, with Taylor Swift wailing, "Now I'm lying on the cold, hard ground," like a goddamn unsatisfactory bitch of an oracle, thinking about his life choices and their generally poor quality. That's when Veronica shows up and leans over him. Hands on her hips, lips pressed together in an expression that could be sympathetic or judgmental, or both, eyeing him over the frame of her glasses. Lance calls that her power pose, and it's one that Keith could do without. Personally. Right now. "Are you okay?" she asks. No preamble. "Do I need to call someone for you?" One thing he can give her credit for. She does appear genuinely worried for his well-being. 15 past? He asks. Answering is highly overrated at this point, and even if she is genuinely concerned, like hell is he going to let this become a thing. Veronica adopts sad college students the way frat guys adopt new versions of beer pong. Keith categorically refuses to become one of her projects. Veronica raises one eyebrow with excruciating slowness. 15 past when you said you needed to leave for class, she says. Right. He did tell her on his way over to the bags that he needed to leave by 3 if he was going to make his 3:30 class. Figures she would have remembered that, even if at the time she just gestured toward the evenly spaced bags on the back wall. "Oh," he says. The amount of judgment she fits into those 2 syllables would be impressive in any other situation. Sure you don't need me to call someone? Keith pushes himself into a vertical sort of position and shakes his head. I'm good, he says. Going to head to class. Thanks to her warning, he'll still make it on time. Whoever ends up seated near him will just have to deal with the sweat. Thanks for the heads up, he adds. Because he does have manners. Also, Lance would kill him if he was a jerk. Veronica raises her other eyebrow. If you're sure, she says, in a way that's clearly meant to suggest that she is the opposite of sure. It's official. Keith can never come back to the gym when Veronica's on shift. Which is unfortunate, because she's just about the only person who reminds him of when he needs to leave for class. This shit is exactly why he needs to give up on the daddy kink plan. Even if that thought makes him want to punch something again. 4 hours later, both his body and his pride still feel the bruising. There's a distinct soreness that slowly expanded from his hip to his entire side. By tomorrow morning, it'll be the kind of pain he grits his teeth through. Honestly, it's the hit to his pride that's rougher. He can't believe Veronica caught him out like that. If she tells Lance, he's never going to hear the end of it unless he commits a felony and flees the country. Maybe the only consolation prize in all of this is that tonight's a Tuesday. Shiro's always out until at least 10 on Tuesday nights. Working in the lab, mostly, or doing homework in the library. Keith won't have to hide his new injury until tomorrow morning, at least. Unlocking the door to their room, he ignores the chattering sophomores walking behind him and giggling. Is that? He hears one of them ask. Defensively, he hefts his backpack higher onto his shoulder and darts into the room. Barely catches the follow-up. No, it totally is him! That could mean so many things. None of them good. All that matters is he's back in his dorm. Habit makes him lock the door even as he drops his backpack onto the kitchenette counter. Slowly, he collapses back against the door to take the weight off his aching hip. Eventually, he's going to have to turn back on his phone. Answer all the texts from his friends. Not tonight, though. This is the first time since Friday that he's been alone in the apartment, and that means he's got shit to accomplish. Namely, getting some frozen peas for his knuckles. And his side. And his pride. Opening the freezer, he grabs a bag of peas. Brown fur catches his eye and his hand tightens reflexively. Peas grind in his fist. The bear. It's probably safe where it is. Shiro never goes in the freezer. Except when Keith is injured. Keith snatches up the bear with his free hand and elbows the freezer door shut. The bear is cold and oddly firm in his hand. When he squeezes, there's a weird sensation of something crunching beneath his fingers. If he was Pidge, he'd already be figuring out how to break the bear open and see what had frozen and why. Maybe that's how he should get rid of the bear. A sacrifice to Pidge. For now, he takes it with him back to his room. Drops on his desk with the peas to be dealt with when he has a few brain cells to spare. Right now, he can't think much past getting out of his sweat-stained clothes, taking a shower, and shoveling food into his mouth. It's as he's doing that first part, getting out of his sweat-stained clothes, that he realizes that probably he didn't do as good of a job assessing his injuries as he should have. Bruises have settled in deep, all the way down to his marrow. He's caught, shirt halfway over his head, the collar snagged in his fingertips while his ribs ache each time he breathes in. Reflexive tears sting at the back of his eyes. Not that bad, he tells himself. It's not that bad. Because it's not, relative to what he's dealt with before. Keith inhales too deep and yanks the shirt the rest of the way off on the exhale. If he's trembling faintly when he drops the shirt to the floor, then there's only the damned bear to witness it. Waking up hurts. More than he expected it to. If he's being entirely honest. Might as well be honest with himself, since he's going to spend the rest of the day lying to everyone else. Keith prods at the bruise. The blue of last night has deepened to indigo. At the edges, it's mottled with a color that could almost be lilac. Judging by where and how his muscles pull as he tries to roll onto his side, it's covering from his fifth rib down to mid-thigh. Lower regions hurt more. Took more of the bag. When he flexes his hands, he's reminded that his knuckles are bruised too beneath the raw skin. That's fine. Keith is always bruise easy. Catching a groan in his lungs, he manages to shove himself out of bed and get to the bathroom. Brushes his teeth with jerky movements. Grabs more bandages from under the sink. Heads back into his room. Stubs his toe on the bed frame and lets out the stream of cussing that his dad taught him was the best way to express pain. Keith? According to the alarm clock, he's still got a half hour before Shiro finishes his morning run. Except, clearly Shiro either finished early or didn't go at all, because that was definitely Shiro's voice, and that is definitely Shiro's footsteps. Worse, any minute now, Shiro is going to realize that Keith's door is open, and he's going to come in. Open doors mean free range in the unspoken terms of their living arrangement. Decisive action really only works when he has only one thing that needs to happen in the span of a few seconds. The bear, still sitting on his desk, needs to be hidden. The bruises, still scattered over his entire torso, need to be hidden. Indecision keeps him still. At the last possible second, he decides. Snatching up the bear, he leans down and chucks it violently under the bed. It tumbles away into the darkness. Now, if he wants to actually get rid of it, he'll have to crawl under his bed. But that's future Keith's problem. Current Keith's problem is straightening up instead of giving in to the urge to crumple onto the floor. It's not going great. Keith? There's a creak as Shiro pauses in the doorway. What happened? Theoretically, Keith should have more time to respond. Shiro has a habit of lingering in the doorway until invited in, even with open doors. Instead, he ignores 2.5 years of habit in favor of crowding into Keith's space. No questions, and no polite waiting, and no boundaries. Pride and maybe a little shame make Keith straighten. Reflexively, he looks up at Shiro. To judge how much Shiro has seen. To minimize whatever Shiro's response will be to the sight of all the bruising. A ready-made answer comes to him, instinctive as breathing, for the question that must come next. Shiro will ask, "Are you okay?" And Keith will answer, "I'm fine." Neither of them will entirely believe it, but it will restore equilibrium. Shiro doesn't ask, though. Just assesses Keith's body. Pauses on the bruising, streaking like twilight over Keith's side. On the raw knuckles from going too hard with too little tape. On the faint trembling that Keith's not quite able to contain. "Oh, Keith," he says. Quiet. Worried. Keith's heartbeat feels uneven. He thinks of the teddy bear under his bed. The smug lilt to Allure's voice as she suggested Band-Aids. The guilt of another night jerking off to the fantasy of being Shiro's. Mostly, he thinks of his decision to give up. Because he has to give up. Can't keep doing this to their friendship. Doesn't want to keep looking into Shiro's eyes when they're dark with worry. Giving up is what's best for Shiro. When Shiro reaches for him, fingertips skimming along his jaw, he jerks back. "I'm fine," he snaps. Keeps his teeth bared even as he bumps into his desk and feels lightning strike pain fracture up from his hip. Too late, Keith realizes he's fucked up. I'm sorry, Shiro says, quieter. It's sincere, but it feels like a reproach. Or maybe Keith's just reading too much into the way that Shiro's squaring up, falling into an echo of military parade rest that he always does when he needs to deal with something painful. It's just... The noise he makes is frustrated, soft, aching. You're hurt, Keith. Like, Keith doesn't know. It's fine, he says. Ducks his head so he won't have to meet those dark eyes that always see right through him. I'm fine. Even without looking, he can feel Shiro weighing the odds, discarding questions that he knows Keith won't answer, judging how far he can push Keith before this whole situation shatters. How fucked up is it that Shiro even has to do that? The thing is that people, Griffin, Iverson, Razavi, like to think of Keith as Shiro's charity case. More accurately, they think of Keith as some feral desert cat that Shiro managed to coax home and now brings to polite gatherings despite it probably being rabid. Keith doesn't know how to behave in a way that would convince people that he's worth keeping around. Can't help himself when the rage or the fear sets in. And so people give Shiro the same pitying looks that people give cat owners covered in scratches and bite marks. No matter what Rommel says about how drunk they'd been when he came up with that, it's a valid metaphor, and Keith carries it around like a talisman. Scraping together his bravery, he dares to look up at Shiro. Keeps his fingertips pressed into the mottled edge of a bruise to keep himself anchored against whatever he's going to see. It's a good thing, because Shiro looks tired in that way he only ever does when Keith's done something that pushed him back into the war. You shouldn't worry about me, he says, desperate to get that look off Shiro's face. Maybe he means it like a peace offering. Shiro takes it like a punch. You don't get to decide that. Each word comes out in a bit enough snarl. Tension coils in his limbs and his hands curl into loose fists. It's not a threat, even if maybe it should be, because he releases them on an exhale. You don't get to decide how I feel about you showing up looking like hit by a car. I trust you to tell me when you're ready, but you need to do better, Keith thinks. I'm sorry, he says. Even to his own ears, his voice sounds small and uncertain. I'm sorry, Shiro. And he doesn't mean to say it. Would rather cut his own tongue out rather than say it again. But when their eyes meet, he says, Can you help me? The next 10 minutes goes like this. Keith sits on his bed because Shiro told him to and listens to the sound of Shiro washing his hands in the bathroom. Keith lets Shiro smear antibacterial gel over each knuckle and wrap his hands, even though the tenderness makes him shake. Keith tries to understand what shifted between them when he asked for help, and Shiro agreed. There you go, Shiro says, tucking the bandage end in securely. I'm sorry, Keith says. Again. Because it feels like he hasn't said it enough. He flexes his fingers experimentally, just to test the bindings, and he's not surprised when there's just enough give to keep him from losing circulation. About 3 times better than he would have been able to manage on his own. Before he can say as much, Shiro reaches up to grasp the back of his neck in a hold that's firm enough to act as a scruffing. Like a kitten, Keith's tremors fade and he goes slack with something like relief. You already apologized, Keith, Shiro says. And I forgave you. It's okay. Probably it shouldn't be okay, but if Shiro says it is, then it is. Shiro leans in closer, pressing his lips to the center of Keith's forehead in a gentle kiss. It feels like forever in the space between heartbeats. You're okay. The home gave him a lot of bad habits. Briefly, back in freshman year, he went to the counseling center and they told him he had a lot of trauma. Like, he didn't know that. Keith doesn't really contextualize his habits with his supposed trauma, though. He sleeps in 3-hour stretches, light and wary, spine pricking with awareness whenever there's an unexpected noise. Now that he's got a door that locks, he doesn't keep his hand on his knife most nights. It stays under his pillow, though, just like his boots stay next to his bed and the keys to his bike stay on a chain around his neck. Always be ready to fight or run or both. He's almost stopped hiding food, but he can't help the triple-sealed Ziploc of jerky he keeps in the box spring. It's fine. Some days he doesn't think he can see anyone, not even Shiro, and he gets out the jerky. One strip can be chewed on for hours. Hunger sometimes feels more familiar than fullness. He thinks he can remember a time when he didn't like fighting. It's all blurred up in memories of his dad, when he could still be the quiet boy in the back of the class who no one bothered. He still fought back then. Mother's Day, when another boy tore the card he made in class because he didn't have a mom, did he? And Keith punched him right in the gut. Dad looked at Keith with such sad eyes over dinner that night, and so he never made another card for Mother's Day. But even without that, he hadn't enjoyed the fight. The home taught him to like fighting. He likes when he clenches his fists and feels the old scars pull taut over his knuckles. He likes baring his teeth and reminding people that smiles are threat signals in other species. He likes how his blood sings in his ears. He likes winning, mostly because that means he's not losing. Shiro taught him how to contextualize all of this. Not on purpose, but when he came home with a split lip after picking a fight in the local bar that doesn't card, Shiro looked at him with sad eyes and empty hands. Only once did he say anything about it. Spring semester freshman year, he caught Keith stumbling into the room, and he said, "If you keep going like this, you're going to kill yourself." It'd been different from the counselor or the social workers. Keith understood then that people had killed themselves this way, and Shiro had witnessed it. More than that, he thought maybe he understood that Shiro didn't want to witness him going out like that. Keith's trying to be better for Shiro. He's just not sure what better means anymore.